Hi, this is Unit 5.5, the equation of a line. This is probably the hardest lesson of the whole year. You may have found some other lessons harder, you may have found them easier. Hopefully, I'm able to explain it in a way that it's not so hard. But if you have any questions after I'm done, please make sure that you contact me. Okay, this is really important stuff. All right, so the equation of a line. To find the equation of a line, you need to know two things about it. You need to know a point on the line, and you need to know the slope of the line. So when we were doing this in the last unit, you always knew what the starting value was. Where did this whole thing start? And then you knew what the constant rate of change was. And from there, you made an equation. And when you didn't know those two things, you had to figure them out. You figured out the constant rate of change by maybe putting things in a table of values and determining that by doing the differences, and then you found the starting values. So there was a whole bunch of different ways you did it. But again, this is all generic. There's just y's and x's, and we don't really know what the relationship is between the two variables. Okay, so there are two possible equations that you would use to figure out what the equation of the line is. You're either going to use, or not two equations, but two forms. You're either going to use slope y-intercept form. Oops. Okay, you're either going to use slope y-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, or you're going to use this brand new form, which is called point slope form. And point slope form is kind of based on the slope formula. I can just show you sort of quickly, and then I'll just erase it. Remember, the slope is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, well, let's just pretend that y2 and x2 are just y and x. They're just a generic y and x. So let's say on a graph, you know a point, or you have a generic x and y, and then you have another point on that graph, x1, y1, and you want to know what's the equation of this line. So we know that to calculate the slope between any 2 points, you do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Well, in this case, my y2 and my x2 are going to be just x and y, so that means that this is going to become y2, sorry, that's not right. This is just going to become y minus y1 over x minus x1. And then if I rearrange this, so like this is m over 1, and I rearrange this, so I'm going to cross multiply, so I'm going to do 1 times y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And 1 times y minus y1 is just y minus y1. And then if I just bring this y1 over to the other side, it's minus on this side, so that just becomes y equals mx minus x1 plus y1, which is this equation here. So it makes sense. It's new, but it makes sense. And this equation can be used to find the equation of a line at any time. Y equals mx plus b is really only good, I'm going to erase all this. Y equals mx plus b is really only good if you know the y-intercept and you know the slope. Otherwise, this new equation works best. Okay, so let's just take a look at, so we're never going to use standard form, ever, ever, ever. We're never going to use this to find the equation of a line. Okay, never, ever, ever. Sometimes that's there, and we find things from it, but we're never going to find it in this kind of scenario. Okay, so find the equation of a line that A has a slope of 13 and a y-intercept of negative 8. Well, if the slope is 13, that means that m equals 13. and the y-intercept is -8, well, that means that b equals -8. So in this case, I would use this version. Oops. I would use this version because I know m and I know b. So why not use it? So then therefore, y equals m is 13, 13x, and b is -8. And you're done. Okay? So if you know the y-intercept, you can automatically use that form of the equation of the line. However, in the next question, we don't know what the y-intercept is. We know the slope, so we know that m equals 5/8, and then we know a point on the line. So we don't know b. B is the y-intercept. So remember the y-intercept being -8 in question A, that's the point 0, -8. Just because you know the y coordinate of a point doesn't mean you know the y-intercept. That's not the y-intercept. That's the point. Like if I just draw a little tiny graph of what's going on here, -12, 7. Like if this is -12 and this is 7, that's that point right there. That's not the y-intercept. So I can't use b as 7 because that's not where this graph is crossing the y-axis. But what I can do is I can say, all right, well, x1, y1, because that's x1, y1 is any point on the line. So x1, y1 equals -12, 7. So if I go to the formula, y equals 5/8 x minus x1 plus y1. Let's just write down the formula first before we actually substitute. So there's the formula. So now y equals 5/8 x minus -12. So minus negative is a plus 12 and then plus 7. And from there, we're just going to expand this out. So y equals 5/8 x. 5/8 times 12. Let's see, the 8 and the 12 will cancel. 4 goes into 8 twice, and 4 goes into 12 3 times. So that's going to be plus 15 halves plus, now I'm going to change this 7 to a 14/2 because I'm going to have to simplify this, I'm going to have to put these two together. Those two are like terms, so they need to be put together to finish this whole thing. So let me just go back to my purple here. All right, so then y equals 5/8 x plus 29 halves, and you're done. So it turns out that the y-intercept on this graph is 29 halves. It's not even close to the number 7. Okay? We're going to do another couple of examples, but that is the gist behind this formula. Y equals m, x minus x1 plus y1. x1, y1 is a point on the graph that you know. All right, part C. This one has a y-intercept at 7, so that means that b equals 7. Now remember, that corresponds to the point 0, 7, and it also passes through the point 2, -6. So x1, y1 equals 2, -6. Now, to use the equation y equals mx plus b, I need to know m. Oops. That's not working for me for some reason. I need to know m and I need to know b. Yeah, I don't know why those aren't working. Oh well. I need to know M and I need to know B. Those are the parameters. Remember, Y and X are the variables. You're not going to substitute anything in for those. M and B, X1 and Y1, those are all parameters. So there's numbers that need to be substituted in for those. So I don't know M. Don't know it. I know B, but I don't know M. And even if I want to use Y equals MX minus X1 plus Y1, I know X1 and I know Y1. X1 is 2, Y1 is negative 6. But again, I don't know M. So at this point, neither one of these equations, I don't know enough information. However, I know 2 points on this line, and whenever you know 2 points on the line, you can use the slope formula to find the slope between those 2 points. So in this case, M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's just call this, let's just call the y-intercept, let's just call it x2 and x1, or y1, y2. I'm losing my brain. x2 and y2. So then we've got 7 minus negative 6 over 0 minus 2, which equals 13 over negative 2. So now, therefore, I can go back to my first formula because now I know M. I know M and I know B. So therefore, y equals negative 13 halves plus 7. And we're done. Okay, now you could have used the other form of the equation. I'll do that over here, but we could have, whoops, I don't want that going from there. Whoops. Okay, we could have used this one here, and we could have said y equals negative 13 halves x. Remember that negative sign can go with the 2 and it can go with the 13. Once it gets calculated, 13 over negative 2, I always throw it up into the numerator. So negative 13 halves x minus 2, because x1 is equal to 2, plus y1, which is minus 6. So y equals negative 13 halves x, expand this out, that's plus 13. When you do negative 13 halves times negative 2, the 2's will cancel, and so you're just left with the 13 times 1, and then minus 6, so y equals negative 13 halves x plus 7. See, we get the same equation no matter what we do. So you pick whichever one you want. We could have even used x1 be 0 and y1 be 7 from the y-intercept. Remember, x1, y1 can be any point at all. It doesn't have to be a point that's not the y-intercept. It can be any point at all. Okay, I'm going to erase this over here because we got the same answer anyway. Okay, so like I said before, when we're taking a look at the next question, we need to know the slope and we need to know a point. So far, I know 2 points. So I'm going to call those x1, y1 is going to be the point negative 2, negative 5. And x2, y2 is going to be the point 6, negative 9. You can't call both points x1, y1. You can't. You can't. And if we had a third point, we'd have to call that x3, y3. Okay? So I know at least 2 points. So I've got my x1, y1, and I could use, all right, here's the honest to God truth. You could use x2, y2 in this formula here too. In this formula, whoops, in this formula, the x1 and the y1 don't have to be x1 and y1. They could be x2 and y2. They could be x3 and y3. They could be x20 and y20. It doesn't matter. As long as they are a point on the line, then you can substitute them in. Okay, any point, doesn't matter. Any point, even the y-intercept, which is 0 and something. They all work. Okay, any point works. Got that? Any point works. Okay, so I need the slope and I need the point. I have 2 points. How do I find the slope? Well, we go to the slope formula. So we do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which is minus 9 plus 5, because subtracting negative 5 gives us a plus 5. And then since I started with minus 9 on the top, I've got to start with the 6 on the bottom, and that's going to be plus 2. Minus 9 plus 5 is minus 4. 6 plus 2 is 8, so that equals negative 1/2. Always reduce fractions, always. Okay, so I'm going to use y equals m bracket x minus x1 plus y1. I don't know the y-intercept. The only time you would ever use y equals mx plus b is if you know what the y-intercept is. I don't know what the y-intercept is, so I'm going to use this other version. So y equals negative 1/2, and like I said before, you can either use x1, y1, or you can use x2, y2. It doesn't matter, but this is going to be x plus 2, because we're subtracting that, subtracting negative 2, and then plus negative 5, whoops, plus negative 5 is a minus 5. So y equals, expand this out, negative 1/2 x, and then negative 1/2 times 2, that 2 and that 2 are going to cancel, so that's just a minus 1, minus 5, so y equals negative 1/2 x minus 6 is the answer. Okay. All right, next one. It has an x-intercept of 0, 6. Remember the x-intercept. If this is the x-intercept, then that's the point 6, 0. And it has a y-intercept of 20. That's the point 0, 20. That is also b. b is 20. And you can only use b in, just because if it had an x-intercept, that's not the b. B is not the x-intercept, b is the y-intercept. So, okay, so what are we going to do? What do you think? Think to yourself. What are you going to do? What do we know? Okay, as far as I know, we know 2 points, which means we can find the slope. So I'm going to do y2 minus y1. So that's 20 minus 0 over 0 minus 6, which is 20 over negative 6. Each of those is divisible by 2, so that's going to be negative 10 over 3. This time I know the y-intercept, so I'm going to go y equals negative 10 over 3x plus 20. And you're done. Now again, we could have used the x-intercept, but if we were going to use the x-intercept, then we would have had to use y equals m bracket x minus x1 plus y1, because the x-intercept is not the y-intercept. So we would have to go y equals negative 10/3 x minus 6 plus 0, which is y equals negative 10/3 x. That's got to be multiplied through there. And then 3 and 6 will cancel to give you a 2 there. And a negative times a negative is a positive, and that's a 20. There is a lot to think about when you're doing these problems. A lot. But the key is you need to know the slope, which is your m, and you can either find that by using the slope formula. Sometimes you are given some information about the equation that will indicate what the slope is. It might actually come right out and tell you what the slope is. Like question A and B told us the slope, said M was 13, said M was 5/8. You know it right away. Sometimes it doesn't give it to you. It gives you 2 points instead. Like one of those points might be an intercept, or both of those points might be 2 different intercepts, but it gives you 2 points so you can find the slope. You have to somehow figure out what the slope is. All right, so in this last question, how does it tell us what the slope is? I don't see 2 points there. It says the line is perpendicular. So all of this is, they start out with find the equation of the line that. So this up here, that's what we're trying to do. Find the equation of the line that is perpendicular. I'm going to use a different color. Is perpendicular to the line y equals -2/3 x minus 1. Perpendicular. We did perpendicular a little bit ago. What do we know about perpendicular lines? Well, in the line y equals -2/3 x minus 1, the slope equals -2/3. This part here is the slope. We want a slope that's perpendicular to that. How do we find the slope that's perpendicular? Go look in your notes. Perpendicular slopes, what are they? Go look. Go look right now. Go look if you don't know already. Stop the video. Go look. Okay. The perpendicular slope, this is the symbol for perpendicular, that one right there, the upside down T. The perpendicular slope, remember you do the negative reciprocal. Okay, so negative, so if it was negative, you make it positive, and then reciprocal means turn it upside down. So the perpendicular slope would be 3/2. So then the slope of this line that I'm trying to find is going to be 3/2. Now, I also need to have my line has to have the same x-intercept as this line. Okay, well, how do you find the x-intercept? What is the x-intercept of that line? Okay, so y equals 3x minus 12. To get the x-intercept, this -12, that's not the x-intercept, that's the y-intercept. So we need to let y equal 0, which gives us 0 equals 3x minus 12. Bring the 12 over, so that'll be a 12 equals 3x. Divide both sides by 3, and x equals 4. Now remember, that's the point 4, 0. That is not the y-intercept, that is the x-intercept. So now I'm going to ask you the next question. Which form of the equation do we get to use? Y equals mx plus b, or y equals mx minus x1 plus y1? Which one do we use here? We've got the slope. Okay, I'm going to use orange. No, I'm going to use green. Okay, we've got the slope, and we have the x-intercept. Which one of those two can we use? If you said y equals mx minus x1 plus y1, you are correct. We cannot use this one. We don't know the y-intercept. Don't use it. So I'm going to erase this because I'm running out of room. And I'm going to say, all right, y equals mx minus x1 plus y1. So y equals, the slope is 3/2. And from the point that I have, that's x minus 4 plus 0. Expanding this out, we get y equals 3/2 x. The 2 and the 4 will cancel. You have a 2 there now, and 2 times 3 is 6. There's your equation right there. All right, so good luck with the worksheet. There is a lot of practice questions there. You have all the way up to R for practice questions. I will post the answers as full solutions. I'm not going to do videos of them unless you need me to. But try them first, try them on your own, and remember those two facts. You need to know the slope. That's number one. Either it's given to you, or you have 2 points and you calculate the slope from those 2 points, or they tell you something about another equation, either perpendicular or parallel. Yeah, those two vertical lines side by side, those mean parallel. So if it's parallel, it's got the same slope. If it's perpendicular, it's got the negative reciprocal slope. So those are the 3 ways that you can figure out what the slope is. And then the next thing that you need to decide, are you going to use y equals mx plus b because you know the y-intercept? Or are you going to use y equals mx minus x1 plus y1 because you know some other point on the line, which could be the x-intercept or any other point, any point whatsoever. Even the y-intercept will work. Like this equation here works all the time, all the time, all the time. All right. Now, this might be a little bit different than maybe if you ask your older brother or sister how to do this. They might not know about this equation right here. Okay, or even you ask some adult, maybe even another teacher, they might not know about that equation right there, but it works. It works every single time. Okay, so I'd like you to try using it. All right, I think that's it for this video. That was a pretty long video, and that'll be it for this week. Well, maybe not. Depends on when I post this. Okay, all right.